Hello, hello, and a very warm welcome from Berlin Fashion Film Festival 2021. Now we'll have, live from the BFFF studio, contributing editor of Vogue Germany, Hella Schneider, who's going to be in conversation with per se menswear brand designers Tim Borchert and Yannick Heidemans, discussing why the duo decided to officially launch their brand and new collection titled Selbstgespräch, facing the challenges in regards to the current lockdown regulations and the message in their fashion films.
Hello everyone, thanks for joining us. We are here to talk with the designer duo behind the new label, Per Se. The two designers, Tim and Yannick, they just recently launched their label. And what you are going to see here during Berlin Fashion Film Festival is the first thing that you'll ever see from the brand, which is super exciting. We're going to talk with Tim and Yannick about the courage that it took to launch a fashion label in the midst of a pandemic, about the ways that they work in a sustainable way, and about their ways of cooperating as a duo. Yeah.
Thanks.
So, hi.
Thanks for having us.
So, I think what is the first obvious thing that I was wondering when I read about you guys was where you took the courage from to actually start a fashion label in these crazy times. Mm-hmm. So yeah, maybe you can tell us a bit about what your thoughts were behind it, like why you thought now or never, or how was the start?
I mean, conceptualizing per se started in 2018. So since then we built the fundament of our work. And yeah, in an artistic approach, it's kind of difficult to come to the point that you feel comfortable to give away the control of your work because it's very personal. On the other hand, it's kind of torture to hold on to the work when you think it's ready. So yeah, I mean, in the beginnings for us as a label, it was not the financial success we're interested in. We just wanted to share our ideas and communicate it in the right way.
And what were these kind of ideas?
Maybe just to add one more thing to that as well is that in an interesting way, the pandemic also corresponds with what we're trying to say with Per Se, as these are times where lots of people have questions that there are no definite answers for. And we kind of got used to this scientific way of working, of answering these questions, that it takes time and that it takes experiments and several approaches. And that's also something that we're trying to communicate with Per Se, that there's no definite answer to a question, and we really want to get to focus on the questions. So in an interesting way, it corresponds and made our work relevant to the time as well.
Sort of like a constant work in progress kind of approach?
Yeah, I think you could say that.
Okay. And I mean, you guys have been friends for 10 years. You both hail from Hamburg and recently relocated to Berlin. So I know that not both of you have a background in fashion originally. So how come your interest in fashion, and how come that you guys both found together to really make a label happen?
Yeah, like you mentioned before, we met 10 years ago through mutual friends, and then quickly realized that we shared kind of a similar aesthetic and a mutual perspectives on various things.
It started very basic, how you meet people. You talk about movies or films you like. You talk about the music you like. The way.
What music was it?
We both grew up on hip hop music, and especially when we met, we were still very much in that zone of music as well, and then kind of expanded.
Hamburg is very known for that.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly, and then kind of expanded the taste to different things, and I think that's also why we inspire each other, because we were always both open to also try and find new areas that we are interested in, and always felt very eager to share that among each other.
Yeah, and I mean, Per Se clearly developed out of a development of our deep trust in each other and in each other's abilities, and the constant way of inspiring each other. And yeah, also I think our idea was that the work should be on focus and not ourselves. So actually we prefer to stay a bit in the background. So yeah.
And you are the one who studied fashion management,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And like Tim, for you, who didn't have a background in fashion, so how come for you that you wanted to, hey, I think that's a great idea to do something with fashion? Because you have a business background.
Yeah, I have more of a business background, but before per se, I kind of let go of that quite a while ago. And was more pursuing personal artistic projects. I was mainly painting before we did per se, and a bit of photography as well. And I also I lived in very different places. Like I spent quite a significant amount of time in Kenya, Nairobi, where I also mostly painted, but also was part of a fashion collective where I supported them on designing clothes. And then spent also a significant amount in Tokyo, Japan. And I think over that course of time, my interest in fashion and that medium as a platform to communicate my ideas grew and turned out to be the medium I feel most comfortable in right now. And also the way we approach the brand, it incorporates a lot of other practices as well and leaves room to venture into those ideas as well. Yeah, so I think that's why I wanted to do this.
So was it kind of like that everything would lead to fashion for you? Like, because you said you did so many different artistic things. So I'm still wondering, like, why you kind of ended up in fashion now? And I mean, not in a negative way. Ended up sounds so negative, but I mean, like, you know, it's something different to like actually do a fashion label than to paint a bit.
Yeah, I'm not so sure if it's so different. Maybe in a very classical approach, and I feel it's almost maybe also an advantage to an extent that I'm not trained on the processes how they are taught in school, for example, that I can start looking at it with a fresh eye and learn and teach myself, and maybe bring some of the approaches how I approached other artistic ideas.
And Yannick, how is that for you? You have a fashion management background, as far as I know. Do you think that has a big impact on how you approach the start of Per Se? Or because you guys mentioned that you didn't want it to be, or it didn't have to be commercial in the beginning, but I'm still thinking that it must have a sort of impact if you have a background in fashion management, no?
Yeah, maybe kind of. I mean, it all started when I was 15 or 16. I got a sewing machine from my mother and started to create my own designs. I mean, there was the start point. And
What did they look like?
It was not a genius, or it was not in a commercial way or something. It was very extroverted. But yeah, it became an interest for me to create things and design. And after school, I decided to study fashion management or textile management. And after that, I was working for several boutiques in sales and buying until we decided to go for Per Se.
So when you worked for these boutiques, did you also feel like a kind of oversaturation with everything that was in the stores there? Like, did that also influence what kind of fashion you wanted to do in the future?
Of course, I think the past has always influences to your creations nowadays. So, yeah, definitely.
And you two, as a duo, that's always something special. It's always a special relationship that you have as a creative duo. So does each of you have like special roles when you guys work together? Like in the design process, do you guys have a very similar way of working and designing, or how is that?
Yeah, I think we design through conversation, and there are no several roles like you would imagine in a classic business model. And yeah, for us, the conversations are the biggest part, and I think the creativity and inspiration derives from these dialogues.
And what kind of dialogues were there before the debut collection?
Very versatile. For us, we talked a lot about our past, how we grew up, socialization. We talked about politics, but also music and other things we're interested in. Basically, like a mix of a variety of topics that leads, or maybe, yeah, leads to the finished idea that we want to communicate. So it's not really set like, today we're going to talk about this and see what we can get out of it. It's more a natural way of conversation.
Mm-hmm. So when you guys are talking about per se, you mention words like serenity or calmness a lot. Can you explain a bit where that hails from?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, we definitely are very interested in explore the quantities of patience and natural influences. Let me give you an example. We expose 3 different garments to the nature itself and to the weather conditions. We hung these garments in a tree and keep them there for several months and are monitoring the weather conditions and how they affect the fabric. So we hope to achieve a result that shows that the fabric can be influenced by the weather conditions you have no control over. So indeed, this is a value we are very interested in per se.
So what happened to these garments?
Oh, right now they're still hanging in the tree, and we're taking constant pictures and writing things down, like what is the humidity like, how much did it rain during that week, all these kinds of details. And then we go into to see what happens. Like we're super interested in seeing what happens if you give away that control. It's basically like if you imagine a great wooden table that you have in your house, and the one which is maybe 300 years old, and you keep wondering like who sat at this table, what happened to it, like why does it have this certain authenticity to it, and we want to achieve that with clothing as well.
Where is that garment tree?
It's actually in my father's garden in good old Spandau. So.
Yep.
All right. I'm kind of reminded of Alexander McQueen, obviously, when he buried his graduate collection in the ground. Is that a sort of reference? Because you couldn't be more far away from the aesthetic. But like that's a reference that comes to my mind.
No, but I think that's something interesting that we monitor all the time, is that I think we live in a sort of postmodern society world where it will become increasingly difficult to create something completely new. But what we do have as a society is this almost unlimited access to previous practices, previous work. And I feel like in the future it's going to become more relevant to improve that access and how to deal with the components you find, and putting them together in a new way that creates something interesting. So I feel like there will always be references found also obviously in our work, and we have stuff that influenced us, although we would never work with direct references. Like our idea is more to take these components and put them together, but then focus on our own work and really go deep and study our own work more than paying attention to what other brands are doing.
So that means you're not bothered by a certain oversaturation of the market, of the fashion world?
Yeah, I would say it was never really a focus for us. And we, to be honest, we also tried not to pay too much attention to what other brands are doing. So we felt like it's more helpful to us to create and then study that work and try to progress on that.
Everything you were saying, and obviously also the aesthetic of per se, to me seems very seasonless. But now you're launching during Berlin Fashion Film Festival, which is part of Berlin Fashion Week. So you are sort of part of a fashion system. So how do you see that? Like, do you envision per se to be part of the fashion system, or how do you see it more standing outside of it? Like, how do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, actually, we're having a lot of conversations about that. I think we believe that there is no outside of the fashion industry. If you're making clothes, you will always be part of it, and depend on its structures. So
yeah, and I mean, on the other hand, we also don't try to limit ourselves in what we're doing. So if we would feel like there's a necessity to do a certain project, we will do it, or to bring a certain idea into life. That's also why we don't see per se purely as a fashion brand. We also working, for example, on projects like a short film that is very far from a fashion film, and a theater play for our next collection. So we're also very interested to expand our ideas to other creative practices. How that at the end of the day plays out, as this is only our first work publicly released now, remains to be seen. But I think we are quite confident that we find our place in some sort of system.
But are there any labels, any other whatever, designers, any other creatives that you would sort of see as a role model? I know that it's a difficult word, but you know, any other creative group that has done something similar that you would look up to? Like, because you're mentioning that you can imagine so many different genres for per se, and not only fashion. So is there anything that would have inspired that?
Obviously, there's many people we also appreciate and also very highly value their work. I think, generally speaking, we always valued work that has a lot of thought in it and is really built on craftsmanship. So I do believe yes, but I think it would be wrong to pin it down to a particular name.
Yeah.
Now that you mentioned craftsmanship, being based here in Berlin, I know it can be sometimes hard to find the right fashion infrastructure. So how's that for you guys? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, it's a sustainable aspect in our work. So our production is very close to our studio. So it's actually reachable by walking. And yeah, I think this is a very big factor in our work here in Berlin.
Was it hard to find these other people that you wanted to work with?
Yeah, definitely. We talk about this all the time, how fragile we see the process of creating something is, and how important it is to work with the right people. And we always try to keep that circle of people very close to us that we work with, and make sure that we work with the people who understand what we're trying to do as well. And at the same time also bring something that inspires us or do something better than we do. So definitely, we feel like it's a very, very fragile process that you have to look out for.
So you guys are saying that you talk a lot in the design process, that basically the design process is talking for you guys. What do you guys talk about most? Is it like cultural things? Is it, you mentioned politics as well, obviously, but I know that you guys are very into certain books, I heard.
Yeah, literature also plays a big part for us, I believe, because I think the most natural thing you would connect to fashion is always music. And I mean, it had great influence on each other, vice versa. But we do believe that there's also room to create these connections with other practices like literature, for example. And we both love certain literature, like, for example, Albert Camus is one who had a big influence on me. Or when I was growing up as a German, you can't come around Hermann Hesse, like that's a very obvious reference. But also people like Thomas Bernhard, who did something interesting in literature, like who changed up the way of writing and construction of sentences. That's something that we also try to transfer again to our designs as well.
What did you recently read that you liked?
Recently, I read a German author, it's Benjamin von Stuckrad-Barre. I like him a lot. So
the one with Martin Suter, where they both talk?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's go back into detail about the, because I think that's a really, really interesting aspect about Per Se, is how the garments live. And it's not only about you experimenting with it, but also that you want the garment that you design and that you sell in the end, you want it to live with the wearer. So maybe you can tell a bit how you can ensure that, like how is that, you know, in the fabrics and in the cuts?
Yeah, in order for the fabric to perform and changes over years with the wearer, it's extremely important for us to use a natural fabric that also experienced a natural dyeing process. For example, we have a leather jacket and it's dyed by the roots of a rhubarb. And the dyeing is not entirely hits the core of the fabric, so it gives the leather a chance to change the characteristics over years. That would be one example.
Another example maybe is a shirt that we have, which is called Bilbergia. And that shirt is constructed in a way and in a fabric that you usually wouldn't expect on a shirt. So it's much tougher and it's a bit tight and maybe even feels a little bit uncomfortable if you wear it for the first time. But it's a bit similar to a good leather shoe, like you have to wear it in and then it molds perfectly to your physics and to your body. And that's what we wanted to achieve with this shirt, for example, and for the wearer to have something that lasts in your closet, that you keep on wearing, and it changes over time with you, and so it remains also interesting to you. Like there's no longing for something new. You can still be excited about something that you already have.
Do you guys personally have something like that in your closet? Like in your personal wardrobe, like a piece that you have had for 10 or more years?
Yeah, basically there are some pieces my grandfather wore, so definitely there are some pieces who are very long living, and now I can wear them with pride, and yeah.
So is this longevity your sort of main sustainable aspect, or are there other aspects as well about Per Se?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, sustainability comes more like a natural component to us in the way we are working. So yeah, I told you that our production is very near to our studio, and but when it comes to fabrics, it's also very important to us that it's a long-living and natural dyed fabric. I mean, even the details of our label is like 100% linen, so yeah. Then we take much care about that as well.
And maybe to extend on that, we also want to remain that sustainability in the relationships that we have with our potential stockists, with our collaborators, going back to what we said earlier, how fragile that process of creation is. We feel like that a long-lasting relationship is so helpful there to create something meaningful, of relevance and lasting. And as well, the overall Per Se brand should be something that is sustainable in terms of having relevance and not being just a quick episode in the industry. With our clothes as well, that's also why we're so keen on also working with brick and mortar stores, is that we feel like if you touch the garments, if you experience the garments in person, it will really help to understand what we are trying to do. And we also think of stores as these locations where people with like-minded ideas and perspectives can meet and exchange and grow something together.
Could you imagine having an own Per Se store as well?
Maybe more as a studio, and then like open in several days. But yeah, maybe for this year we don't know yet. But yeah.
Going back to the sustainable aspects and the fabrics. You guys decided to use Japanese fabrics, but on first sight, one would have thought that like in a local approach, it would possibly have made sense to use German or European fabrics just because they don't have to be transported through the whole world. So why was it so important for you to use those fabrics?
Yeah, I think as mentioned before, for us, it was extremely important to find fabric that has the ability to change over time and that is created in a way to exactly allow that to happen. And when I spent time in Tokyo, as I mentioned before, I was able to meet people and create relationships with people that produce fabrics there in a very traditional way and in a very beautiful way that you would not see in many other places. So that was one deciding factor to go for the Japanese fabrics.
Yeah. I mean, but also in the future, it would be the perfect setup for us to not only have the production as close as it is right now, but also create an environment where all the creation components comes together and are close as possible to us. But yeah, I mean, the fabric needs to meet our ideas of quality and feel. That's very important to us.
And that's hard to find here, right?
Exactly, like especially for a very young, newly founded brand, it will be something we definitely hope to achieve in the future, as that would be the ideal setup to also start being more involved in the fabric creation and production.
The title of the collection is Selbstgespräch, which basically means self-talk or monologue. You described how you two communicate all the time, but self-talk is obviously something different. So I don't know, where did that hail from? Like, do you guys do self-talks a lot, or where did that come from?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, it's more about the conversation, and the point with the Selbstgespräch or self-talk is that yeah, we always have to reflect these conversations and then go into an inner dialogue, you know, and yeah, I mean, that's the biggest part of our work to have these dialogues.
I think a good example for that is the state of mind you're entering right before you go to sleep, right before you fall asleep. It's when you're still conscious, you are in a very relaxed state that fosters a lot of creativity. And scientists call it hypnagogia. And that was very interesting to us, and we just wanted to stress that topic more, as we think it's often overlooked, and refreshing the inner dialogue in order to create was something that helped us a lot in bringing these ideas to life.
So it's this sort of a very intimate state that you want to do with per se, I guess.
Yes, I think you could say that.
I mean, when I looked at the collection first, I felt there's a certain, it's obviously kind of minimalist, but also it has a certain mystical feel to it because it has a certain historical feel, maybe. So I was kind of reminded of some aspects of like 90s Antwerp in a way. Mm-hmm. But yeah, what tradition do you see per se in?
Difficult to say. I think it comes down back to what I mentioned before, this postmodern society where it's more about bringing components together from various times and traditions, and then trying to create something interesting from that. There's definitely also an admiration in us for the 90s Antwerp movement. I think it's a good example for what designers, independent designers, can bring to the industry when they create with a lot of thought and craftsmanship and idea. And yeah, I think it's a good example of components that were interesting to us.
Why is Berlin the perfect place for per se? I mean, not Hamburg, where you guys used to live before, not Tokyo, not New York, not Antwerp. Why Berlin?
I think in general, we don't really associate a certain location, city with per se. For us, it was one out of personal reasons, to be honest. And then on the other hand, also Berlin gave us the environment and infrastructure that we wanted in the beginning, with the production being very close, as Yannick mentioned. And it also, since we were new here at the beginning, it allowed us also to create sort of anonymously, which is a state that we like as well. And so I think that's why we came here. But after all, we wouldn't associate the brand with a certain location.
Was it also because of other creatives? That like the creative scene here in Berlin, which is obviously a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, it gave us a lot of possibilities to work with people we didn't know before in Hamburg. So, but the main point we moved to Berlin was, as Tim mentioned, personal.
And speaking in a very cliche way, but what do you think, people that are outside of Germany, do you think they would associate you guys with a certain German design tradition? If we think of Jill Zander's minimalism, for instance, like, is there anything that you see, very German in a way about Per Se?
I think that's difficult to say. Like, as mentioned, we wouldn't personally associate with any location, but as also mentioned before, we're really into asking questions and also transporting these questions to the wearer. And we hope that the wearer then, for him or herself, can decide what location they associate this with, and if they see that in line with any tradition that came before us. But I think it would be difficult for me also to imagine what is a German fashion brand. So yeah, I would leave it at that. Yeah.
So you guys talked a lot about the durability of your designs. How is that shown or reflected in a fashion film? Like, does it work better to see Per Se on film than instead of with runway pictures, for instance? Like, why did it make so much sense for you to be part of Berlin Fashion Film Festival?
I think film has always been a very emotionally driven medium where you can actually communicate a lot of emotions. And that's why it's also so interesting for us. For us, we see also the films that we want to do are not like typical fashion films where we would show a garment. It would be more like creating a story or a story that we want to communicate through that medium and learning through that medium and communicating with that. We feel like we are greatly inspired by a lot of films as well. So that's definitely a big part.
Which films, for instance?
We really liked, and as an inspiration, we looked all these Tchaikovsky movies, and I think it's giving you a certain feeling, and that is what we want to do with Per Se as well.
You mentioned earlier that you could imagine doing a film, or that you're actually working on a film. What would it be like? Like, what can we expect from it? Because we're at Berlin Fashion Film Festival, so we have to talk about films.
Sure, yeah. We're actually working on a short film right now that we're also planning to submit to the competition. And we're working on that with actually the person who was our model for the shoot. We somehow became friends, and then he's a director, and we are planning to shoot on 16 millimeter. And I hope it's going to be something great that people will enjoy.
Can you tell a bit what the storyline is going to be like, or the aesthetic, or like something that we can expect?
Yeah, it will be not that bright. It's more, a bit sad, and yeah.
It's a bit darker, but
darker, yeah.
we wouldn't want to give away too much. The idea of how to deal with memories and how they come up within you plays a big role in it.
Matching these sort of dark times. Our time is over. Thanks, Tim and Yannick, for letting us know a little part of your world. Thanks, everyone, for joining. I hope you guys are excited about what Per Se is going to have in store with their serenity and calmness. And I guess that's something that we all need in these times.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Helen.
Bye.
I know they're important. I'm just a little exhausted, that's all.
Yeah, anyway, I just got another option for you. So the casting will be at 11.